Reading my husband's will felt like something straight out of a courtroom drama. Sitting in the lawyer's office, I tried to stay calm while my mother-in-law, Margaret, sat beside me, looking smug. She had the confidence of someone who believed she had already won. With a smirk, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Everything belongs to me." The lawyer gave her a polite nod but then picked up another document. His expression changed slightly, making my heart pound. "Actually, Mrs. Henderson," he said, "there's a personal message for you." Margaret's smirk disappeared. Her eyes narrowed as she grabbed the paper he handed her. I held my breath as I watched. This moment felt surreal, like something out of a movie, but it was real. "My name is Emily, and I was married to Daniel for 10 wonderful years. Our life together was full of love, laughter, and dreams, but there was always one shadow looming over us, his mother, Margaret. From the start, she made it clear she didn't approve of me. It wasn't personal, she would have hated any woman who took her son's attention away. She constantly accused me of only wanting his money, even though Daniel and I built our life together. She wanted to control him, and when we got married, she saw it as a betrayal. No matter how hard I tried to be a good wife, in her eyes, I was the enemy, and Daniel, despite everything, always longed for her approval. He kept hoping she would change, but she never did. Even when he got sick, she showed little concern. It broke my heart to see him reach out to her, only to be met with cold indifference. Daniel passed away 6 months ago. It wasn't sudden, we had time to prepare, but knowing it was coming didn't make losing him any easier. Before he died, Daniel updated his will. He knew his mother would try to take everything from me, and that's how we ended up in this lawyer's office, with Margaret thinking she had already won. The lawyer started reading the will in a steady voice. "To my beloved wife, Emily, I leave our home, our savings, and all my personal belongings." I glanced at Margaret. Her smug look faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered, certain she would still inherit his investments. Then the lawyer picked up another document with a small smile. "To my mother, Margaret," he continued, "I leave." He stopped and slid an envelope across the table. "This personal message." Margaret snatched the letter, her hands trembling slightly. As her eyes scanned the words, her face turned red with anger. Suddenly, she slammed the paper down. "This is a joke," she snapped. I leaned forward, my heart racing. "What does it say?" The lawyer handed me a copy. As I read Daniel's words, a lump formed in my throat, and my eyes burned with unshed tears. "Dear Mom, if you're reading this, you probably think you've won, but you never could. You controlled me for most of my life, but you will not control my wife. You made me feel like I was never enough, but in my final moments, I found peace, because I had a wife who truly loved me. I could have forgiven you, but I won't. A mother's love should be unconditional, and you never gave me that, so I owe you nothing. Everything I have goes to Emily, the woman who stood by me when you never did." Silence filled the room. Margaret sat frozen, her face twisted in fury. With a sharp motion, she shoved the letter aside. "He didn't mean this," she shouted. "He was sick. He didn't know what he was saying." The lawyer remained calm. "I assure you, Mrs. Henderson, Daniel was of sound mind when he wrote this. His wishes are final. You won't be receiving anything." Margaret turned to me, eyes blazing with fury. "You did this. You poisoned his mind against me," she yelled. I met her glare, my voice steady. "No, Margaret," I said quietly, "you did this to yourself." She shot up from her chair, nearly knocking it over. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll take you to court. That house should be mine. That money should be mine." The lawyer leaned back, unfazed. "You're free to contest the will," he said, but Daniel made sure it was airtight. "You'll only be wasting your time and money." Margaret's mouth opened as if she wanted to argue, but no words came out. Her hands clenched into fists. Finally, with a frustrated huff, she stormed out of the office. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Daniel had known what was coming. He had protected me. And for the first time in months, I felt something other than. Margaret's eyes darted between the lawyer and me, and for the first time, she looked like she realized she had lost. Her face twisted with rage, and with one last furious glare, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I let out a deep breath. Daniel had done it, even from beyond the grave. He had protected me, standing up to his mother in a way he never could when he was alive. It was a relief to know that, in the end, he had chosen me, chosen us. But something in my gut told me this wasn't over. And I was right. That evening, I walked into my living room, my heart pounding, and froze. The room was destroyed. Furniture was overturned, picture frames shattered, and papers were scattered everywhere. It looked like someone had torn through the house in a fit of rage. My hands shook as I took a step back, the reality of what had happened sinking in. I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. The police arrived quickly and searched the house, but whoever had done this was already gone. Nothing was stolen, only ruined. This wasn't a robbery. It was a message. And I knew exactly who had sent it. Over the next few weeks, my life turned into a nightmare. Strange cars parked outside my house at odd hours. My trash bins were knocked over in the middle of the night. Dead flowers kept appearing on my doorstep. I barely slept, always feeling like someone was out there, watching, waiting. Then, one night, a knock on the door sent my heart into my throat. I hesitated, peering through the peephole. It was Margaret. Fear and exhaustion battled inside me. I almost didn't open the door, but I couldn't hide forever. Taking a deep breath, I turned the knob. She stood there, her expression cold, a mocking smile curling her lips. "Enjoying the house?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I didn't answer, but her smirk only grew. "I'm not going to stop," she said. "You might think you've won, but this isn't over." She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "You took my son from me, now, I'm going to take everything from you." Her words hit me like a slap. But instead of fear, something else rose inside me. Resolve. This bitter, controlling woman had spent years trying to manipulate Daniel's life, and now she thought she could do the same to me. I took a step forward, my voice steady. "Listen to me, Margaret, you've already lost. Daniel saw you for who you really are. No matter what you do, you'll never win. This house is mine, my life is mine, and you have nothing. You did this to yourself." For the first time, something flickered in her eyes. Fear. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. She gritted her teeth, seething with rage, then turned and stormed off into the night, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding. I knew this wasn't over. And I was right. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my lawyer. And what he told me changed everything. I had barely slept, replaying Margaret's threats in my mind. When the call came, I snatched up the phone, my stomach twisting with dread. "We have a problem," my lawyer said, his voice tense. I exhaled sharply. "What now?" "Margaret just filed a lawsuit. She's claiming Daniel had a secret will, one that leaves everything to her." My heart stopped. "A secret will? That's ridiculous." "I know," he replied, "but she's filed the paperwork, and the worst part? She has a witness." A cold chill ran down my spine. "A witness?" I whispered. Then he said the name that made my stomach drop. "Mark. Daniel's best friend since childhood, his best man at our wedding, the man who had stood beside me at the funeral, tears in his eyes. I had trusted him completely. And now, he was siding with Margaret. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my phone and called him. He answered after a few rings, his voice calm, but distant. "Hello?" I didn't waste a second. "Tell me this isn't true, please, Mark, don't help her." A long pause, then he finally spoke. "I don't want to get involved," he said, "but Margaret says Daniel changed his mind before he died." "We'll need a handwriting expert," my lawyer said. Then he turned to his computer and clicked a button. "There's something else." The screen came to life. I watched in shock as Daniel appeared on video. His face looked thinner and more tired, but his voice was as strong as ever. "If you're watching this," he began, looking directly into the camera, "it means my mother is trying to take what isn't hers." Tears filled my eyes as his words filled the room. Even in death, Daniel had seen this coming. He knew exactly what Margaret would do, and now, from beyond the grave, he was setting the record straight. "If you're in court right now, lying to steal my inheritance, know this, that so-called will is worthless, and Mark's lies mean nothing." Daniel's voice grew firmer and more determined. "Because I've outsmarted both of you, even from beyond the grave." My blood ran cold as his words echoed in my mind. Daniel had known everything. He knew that his mother and his best friend had been working together against him for years, even before he died. But this wasn't just about betrayal. Daniel wasn't only exposing a scheme, he was unraveling a web of deception, one that had been carefully spun over time. Then he said something that sent a chill down my spine. "I know you stole from my father, from the company." And then the final blow. I know you paid Mark years ago. I could hardly breathe. Daniel had known all along. This wasn't just about his inheritance, it was about everything they had done, every secret they had hidden. And now, the truth was finally coming out. The screen flickered as my lawyer clicked through files, showing documents that left me stunned. Unauthorized transfers, missing funds, secret accounts, each one was a painful discovery. You thought I wouldn't notice. Daniel's voice echoed through the room, cold and sharp, but I did. Then his final revelation hit me like a freight train. Daniel had uncovered Margaret's hidden accounts, the ones she used to siphon off money, with Mark covering her tracks. Even worse, he had gathered undeniable proof to expose them both. That's why I set a trap, Daniel continued, a slight, confident smile in his voice. The ultimate revenge. The video ended. For a moment, the silence was overwhelming. My lawyer let out a low whistle, clearly stunned. That changes everything, he muttered, still absorbing Daniel's words. I asked, wait, what did he mean by a trap? My lawyer's eyes lit up with determination. I think we need to find out. We dove into Daniel's records, scouring emails and files, anything we could get our hands on. What we uncovered was more shocking than I could have ever imagined. There were forged documents, suspicious bank transfers, and evidence of bribery. Margaret hadn't just tried to steal from me, she had been siphoning money for years, funds from her own father's estate funneled into fake companies, sent overseas, and laundered with Mark's help. I sat back in disbelief, my hands shaking. What do we do now? I whispered. My lawyer smiled, his eyes full of certainty. We're not just defending ourselves, we're going to take them down. The next day, we filed criminal charges, fraud, theft, conspiracy. Margaret and Mark were about to face the legal consequences of their years of deception. That afternoon, Margaret showed up at my house. Her face was pale, and her once unshakable confidence was gone. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Call off your lawyer, let's make a deal. I didn't hesitate. I stepped forward and met her gaze, my voice steady. No. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She had always believed she could intimidate and manipulate her way to the top, but Daniel had seen through her all along. Even from beyond the grave, he was still calling the shots. The evidence was overwhelming: bank fraud, money laundering, stolen inheritance funds, and electronic transfers that linked directly to Margaret and Mark. Mark hadn't just lied, he had been part of it, helping Margaret cover up the truth. We turned everything over to the authorities, and soon the walls began closing in on them. Margaret's downfall was swift. The IRS froze her accounts, cutting off the stolen money that had kept her afloat. Soon after, the police raided her home. That morning, I woke to the sound of sirens outside. Not long after, the news broke. Authorities were investigating financial crimes linked to the inheritance. I watched in disbelief as Margaret was led away in handcuffs, her proud demeanor crumbling. She looked around desperately, searching for someone, anyone, to help her. Mark, in a frantic attempt to escape, tried to flee the country, but the police intercepted him just in time. The trial moved quickly. The evidence was damning: stolen money, fraudulent accounts, a forged will, and bribes. Yet the most powerful moment came when Daniel's second video was played in court. It was long and tense, striking a deep chord with everyone present. By the time it ended, the entire courtroom erupted into applause, moved by his words from beyond the grave. I'll never forget the look on Margaret's face as her own son exposed her lies for everyone to see. Her jaw tightened, and with a furious roar, she slammed her fists on the table until her knuckles turned white, her face twisted with rage. In that moment, it was clear, she had lost everything. The judge wasted no time. Margaret was sentenced to 15 years in prison for financial fraud, and Mark received 10 years for his role in covering up her crimes. They were both going to pay for the years of deception and manipulation they had inflicted on Daniel, and on me. But the final blow came when, still reeling from defeat, Margaret reached out to me one last time. A letter arrived from prison. The message was short and venomous. You think you've won, but you think you've won without Daniel. You took him from me, and I will never forgive you. I stared at the letter for a long time, letting her words sink in. It hurt deeply. Then I made a choice. I knew what would hurt her most. So, without a second thought, I sealed the letter back up and sent it back, unread. And then I let it go. In the end, Margaret lost everything: her money, her freedom, and the false reputation she had spent years building. As for me, I sold the house she had fought so desperately to take from me. With the money, I started fresh, leaving the pain and memories behind. But as I stood there, ready to move on, I realized something. The greatest gift Daniel gave me wasn't just his final act of defiance, it was his love. The life we built, the family we created, our home may have been a battleground, but our love was its foundation, a foundation that will never crumble. Even now, when I walk through quiet rooms and trace the walls where we once laughed and dreamed, I feel his presence. Daniel may no longer be here in body, but in my heart, he will always remain, and with every step I take forward, I carry him with me, his spirit, his love, and the unbreakable bond we shared. Because in the end, Daniel won. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. Not because I took anything from anyone, but because even in death, Daniel and I triumphed together, proving that love, in its purest form, can never be broken. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. See you next time.